Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our March Zoomcast session. We did this session last Thursday for the first time, and we had a capacity crowd, and we're going to get a lot of people today. So this is exciting. This is a great topic. We started the Zoomcast series a number of years ago, and it's all about not being the smartest person in the room. It's about being in a room where everybody gets smarter. One of the things that the insurance industry does is it shares information, and we certainly want to keep going in that vein because it's important. It's important that we share information. It's important that when we go to events like this, that it's everyone in the room gets smarter. So that's really the thesis of what we're doing today. And it's about sharing information. For signing up for today, you're going to get Mike Ignatz is going to send you out a CE credit as well as a copy of the slide deck. You're going to get signed up for our Trusted Advisor newsletter, which comes out every single month, and we've done it for 155, I think, consecutive months. And as well as that, you're going to get a really short survey. The survey is about 63 seconds long, and we'd ask you to fill it out and send it back to us. And part of that survey, it says, hey, great, how can we do it better tomorrow than we did it today? But also, what subjects would you like to see covered in future Zoomcasts? And as a matter of fact, this session came from feedback from you. The session that we're doing today on stop loss insurance and questions and answers and so on came from feedback that we've received from you. So we listen. So please take a moment and fill out that survey and let us know how we did it and let us know what future subjects you'd like to see. Now, before I start sharing information, I want to introduce a couple key people that are with us today from the Benefits Trust. Running things behind the scene, Rob is back in the house here, and he's running things behind the scene. Joining us today as a special guest, Claire Winstanley from our Director of Underwriting is here, and she's going to be making part of the presentation today. Jordan Bulhose is here as well from the Benefits Trust. Carrie Lane is in the house, and Mike Ignatz, of course. And another special guest that's joining us today, one of our plan administrators, Ella Ferguson, is with us today. So welcome, Ella. It's her first time on a Zoomcast, and she wants to learn more about this stuff. So on that note, let me share my screen and let's get started. Here we go. Excellent. The other thing I want to remind everybody of, if you've got a question throughout the presentation today, we encourage that. We encourage questions and discussions and so on. So please either put it in the little chat box and one of our wonderful staff will be able to answer your question, but that way everybody can see the question because they might have the question as well, and they can also see the answer. As well as that, if you want to put up your little hand emoji, it'll pop up on my screen, and then I'll get to you and we can have a discussion about it. Today we're going to talk about stop loss, questions and answers around stop loss. And stop loss is a term that we use at the Benefits Trust. It can also be not confused with, but compared to, if you would, large amount pooling in a traditionally fully insured employee benefit plan. Maybe we've all heard the expression or the term large amount pooling. So let's talk about stop loss, questions and answers. What we are going to, hold on a second. Let me just move this down here. There we go. What we're going to talk about today is about the Benefits Trust and not so much a commercial for us, but to tell you sort of where we're coming from and how we're approaching this. We're going to talk about what stop loss is, when do you need it, 5 questions to ask, and we're also going to share some prospecting ideas, and then we're going to have time for question answers and discussions. We're going to wrap things up right at 11 o'clock sharp. So you will get your CE credit following your participation to that time. But if you want to stick around for a few minutes after to get into some more specific questions or ideas or thoughts, please feel free to stick around. We'll stick around for a few minutes as well. So that's our agenda. That's what we're going to do. So a little bit about the Benefits Trust. We started on January 1st, 1994. So we've been around for some time, 30 plus years. We are a full service TPA or third party administrator. We're the largest independently owned TPA in Canada. In 2024, we were named a top benefit provider by our friends at Benefit and Pension Monitor magazine. In 2024 and 2025, we're also a top employer in this business, so we practice what we preach. As well as that, late in 2025, in December of last year, we were awarded a 5-star technology award because of our app and how we use that and how easy it is and interactive it is to use. So we're really proud about that. So we're a top benefit provider, we're a top employer, and we've got 5-star technology as well. We provide custom employee benefit solutions to all of our end user clients. We surveyed our clients recently, and we got an overwhelming, like 95% feedback on exceptional client experience. So we provide clients with service. That's what we do. We answer the phone. It's as simple as that, and we provide them transparent and custom solutions, but we give them a great experience when they deal with us. We have long-term relationships with all the major insurance carriers in Canada, as well as all the service suppliers who are not tied to any one particular carrier. And our target market is working with advisors like you that are on this call right now, and working with clients that are really from 1 to 100 employees. That's our target market because, quite frankly, in Ontario, and I know we've got people from other provinces, but in Ontario alone, there are 450,000 businesses with 1 to 100 employees. So that's really what our target market is. But again, we work with a lot of larger clients. But again, our target market is working with advisors like you, helping solve your clients' problems. So that's really where we're coming from when we're discussing stop loss insurance. Before we get into it, I like to use really simple language because when we're talking to advisors or we're talking to advisors and their clients or their prospects, we want to keep it simple. We want to keep it very simple because a lot of times clients, regardless of their size, they're looking at their employee benefit plans for maybe 30 to 60 minutes a year, especially if it's a small case. They get 15 employees or 20 employees, whatever it is. They're looking at their benefit plan maybe 30 minutes a year. So an employee benefit plan is a promise. It's as simple as that. It's a promise between an employer and an employee. We make a promise to our employees. They come to work, they get paid $45,000 a year or $100,000 a year, whatever it is. They get, 3 weeks vacation, they get free parking, and if they go to the dentist, they get 80% of their expenses covered up to a certain maximum. That's an example, but it's just a promise that we are making our employees. So an employee benefit plan is a promise that an employer makes to an employee. And it's really interesting. I have no idea where this came from, but I was in a client meeting or I was in a prospecting meeting with an advisor. This is a number of years ago, and you could tell the advisor really wasn't doing a good job, quite frankly. And the prospect was getting really upset. His time is valuable, and he was getting really upset about this particular meeting and how it was going. And you could tell because of his body language, he was sitting back in his chair and he had his arms crossed and he had an angry look on his face. And I sort of interrupted and I said, "No, what are we talking about here?" And the client or the prospect looked at me in this case and he goes, "We're talking about life insurance and dental insurance, group insurance." And I said, "No, no, we're not talking about that." And he looks at me and goes, "What are we talking about then?" I said, "We're talking about a promise that you make as the business owner to your employees." Again, no idea where this came from in the back of my melon here, right? But all of a sudden, I said, it's a promise. I used a very simple language. It's a promise. And a promise means something. When I make somebody a promise, I got to keep that promise. It's my integrity. And all of a sudden, his body language changed. He sort of looked, a little bit puzzled. And then you could see the light going off in his head. And I said, you can promise anything you want. And you could really see the meeting change, and the whole conversation changed, and it went on from there. And then the client or the prospect became a client for this particular advisor and us, and it worked out well. But it was that one word that changed this meeting. So when we're thinking about an employee benefit plan, let's think about it as a promise between an employer and an employee. What is insurance? Insurance is sharing of risk. Many of you may have heard the expression, "I'm waiting till my ship comes in." And this is kind of a fascinating story, waiting for my ship to come in. Back, many, 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 many years ago, this is how Lloyd's of London started. There used to be a bunch of rich ship owners that would hang out at Lloyd's Cafe in London, and it was a coffee house primarily or a bar in London. And the ship owner would be sitting there, and he'd be talking to people in the bar, and he would be saying, "Hey, I'm just waiting for my ship to come in." And what he was saying is, "I'm waiting for my ship to come in because at that point, when my ship does come in, I'm going to be rich because I built a ship which cost a lot of money. I put sails on it. I hired a captain. The captain got a crew. I said, I want you to go, you know, and fill this ship up with spices. I want you to sail to India and fill the ship up with spices, and then come back here to England. And then when my ship comes in, I'm going to be rich." And there's another guy in the bar, and he goes, "Well, that's interesting because I've done the same thing. I'm waiting for my ship to come in, and it's going to be, my ship was sent to Asia, and it's going to be filled up with tea." And another one said, "Hey, I've sent it to this particular neck of the world, and you know what? I'm filling it up with silk." So people were sitting there waiting for their ship to come in, and a lot of things can happen with these old ships. They can, sink. They could be taken over by pirates. They could be stuck in battles, whatever it was. There could be a mutiny, and the crew takes it over, takes the control of the ship over. A number of things could happen. There could be fires, etc. And this is, long before there was a lot of communication and navigation tools and so on. So the risks were high. So what the ship owners did is they say, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't I share in the risk of your ship and share in the risk, and you share in the risk of my ship? And that way, if your ship comes in and my ship doesn't, we both make lots of money, right? But if your ship doesn't come in and my ship comes in, again, we're both making lots of money and we'll be better off." And that's really how Lloyd's of London started. It was started in, again, Lloyd's Bar, I think, in England. And I know there's a lot more details to the story, but it's really about sharing of risk. It's about sharing of risk and sharing of risk with others. And that's what insurance is. It's sharing of risk with others. So what is stop loss? Well, stop loss is nothing more than an insurance policy protect, or an insurance policy is there to protect against sudden high unexpected high cost events. You buy an insurance policy on your home, you buy an insurance policy on your life, you buy an insurance policy on your cars, you buy insurance policies on many things. And stop loss insurance is simply an insurance policy protecting the plan sponsor or who's ever making the promise against specific, sudden, high cost events. Simple as that. Plan sponsor is protecting against specific, sudden, unexpected high cost events. So, what specific events does a plan sponsor need to protect against? You're making a promise to your employees. What events do you need to protect against? Well, hey, tonight I'm going to go to bed, and just before I go to bed, I'm going to take a cholesterol medication. I'm going to take a cholesterol pill that helps me with my cholesterol levels. And I'm taking a generic pill, and the cost of that is literally pennies a day. Is that unexpected? No, it's not expected. It's not unexpected. I'm going to take it every single night. It's certainly not a high cost event, right? But what happens if all of a sudden somebody needs a claim, a prescription medication, and that medication could be $100,000 a year, and you got to take that medication for the next 10 years? Then all of a sudden it becomes $1 million claim. So this is an event that a plan sponsor would need to protect against. It's a high cost, unexpected event. So that's what we need insurance for, to protect against those sudden, unexpected, high cost events. And in this case, a stop loss policy, it's a specific, sudden, unexpected, high cost event. So when do you need stop loss? Well, it depends on the promise that your client wants to make. All right, that your client would like to make. As simple as that. The promise will determine the amount of risk that's needed, and if it needs, in fact, to be mitigated by a stop loss policy. So it depends on the promise. It truly, really depends on the promise that the employer is making to the employee. And is there a chance of those specific, unexpected, high cost events? And if the answer is yes, then you need a stop loss policy. And the reason is quite frankly, no one likes surprises. Nobody likes surprises. I threw a 50th surprise party for my wife a number of years ago. I can't tell you exactly the number because she'd be mad. But anyways, I threw a surprise party for my wife. It was a great party. Everybody loved it. Everybody had a great time. It was wonderful. But when we crawled into bed, it was probably around 3 o'clock in the morning. And, after everybody had left and we finished cleaning up as much as we could that night, she goes, "That was a terrific party. And I really appreciate all the effort you went through. And it was wonderful to see all of my friends and some I haven't seen in some time. And it was just a great celebration. But you got to make me a promise that you never do that again." I didn't have my hair done right. I wasn't wearing the right outfit, whatever it was. So no one likes surprises, and especially business owners. They don't like surprises. I'm a business owner. I don't like financial surprises, right? So our job as advisors is to understand what the client wants to promise their employees, and advisors need to explain the risk of what that promise will be. And I think it's important that we're proactive as opposed to reactive. So no one likes surprises. So a purpose also of an insurance policy is to eliminate financial surprises. So I've spoken for the last 15 minutes here, and really you don't want to hear me speak. You want to hear the lady that's got all of the details about stop loss insurance. So I'd like to introduce Claire Winstanley. Claire Winstanley is our Director of Underwriting here at the Benefits Trust. She's been with us 25 years. We just had her 25th celebration. And I'm really happy to introduce Claire. And Claire is going to share her knowledge and her wisdom and go through some of the details of the stop loss that we offer. So, Claire, over to you.
Thanks very much, Rob. Good morning, everyone. So we're going to get right to it, really, and start by discussing what stop loss insurance is by definition. Stop loss is a layer of insurance with a high level deductible that protects ASO clients from catastrophic claims, as Rob has sort of already alluded to. Stop loss is typically managed on a per patient basis rather than on a per family basis. Since individuals get sick rather than families, this ensures that an affordable benefit that addresses the true unexpected high cost claim is available for the employer and to protect the plan overall. What's considered catastrophic might vary by group size. And so the key is really to what level a group can handle an influx of claims if a large claim does occur, and setting that stop loss level at an appropriate place so that that group is protected. It might be only $7,500 for a small group, or upwards of 20,000 or even 50,000 for a larger group. As a result, the stop loss attachment level would be adjusted based on what that group can manage. And most carriers we're seeing are pushing that average level to about $15,000 a year per person.
So, Claire, sorry if I could just interrupt. So, that's
Mhm.
just an insurance policy with a deductible.
Yes,
Yeah, it's just a deductible. And just like your car insurance might have a deductible. And depending on your cars, it might be, and depending on your cars and how big of a check you can write, and how big of a risk that you want to take as the car owner, it could be $500, it could be $1,000, it could be $2,500. It's the same thing with the stop loss policy.
exactly.
I promise I won't interrupt again.
Okay, so in the end, what's the purpose of the stop loss coverage? In an ASO arrangement, the programs are fully funded by an employer. So, with the potential for cost sharing with the employees as well, the idea behind that budgeted ASO program is that most health and dental claims, as Rob discussed, are transactional and often predictable. Most people go to the dentist regularly, whether that's every quarter or once or twice a year. And so typically, usage of a group is largely made up of that normal attendance as a whole. Similarly, Rob's prescription medication he'll spend about the same amount every year on that medication and year over year on a consistent basis. Most acute medications like antibiotics are relatively inexpensive, and so they don't make up a big uh, portion of that potential concern. But when a high cost claim occurs, the sponsoring entity needs to protect themselves to ensure that the plan doesn't become unaffordable, whether it's a one time claim or whether it's an ongoing need for an employee. Not everything is eligible under the stop loss provisions, though. Stop loss insurance only covers expenses that would result in a catastrophic claim. So, items like prescription drugs, hospitalization, nursing care, and in some cases, appliances if they relate to the reason for a large claim. Think wigs for cancer treatment or prosthetics. It would not include items like a CPAP machine, paramedical expenses, or eyeglasses, as these are usually limited by the plan and not tied to the stop loss claim itself. Eligible claims are always tied to the eligible expenses under a given contract or in that core benefit program that's been set up for the employees. And they're paid based on those contract provisions. So if a prescription drugs are reimbursed at 80% or there's maximums on nursing care, those would limit the overall accumulation of claims and therefore the overall accumulation of claims paid out on the plan potentially covered by that stop loss provision. Excluding an item from your plan provisions will also exclude it from stop loss eligibility. And stop loss pays out when the claim based on those contract provisions exceeds the annual stop loss threshold or attachment level. So let's say there's a stop loss claim being paid under a given plan. What does that look like to the member and to the sponsoring employer on a traditional ASO program? As with an insured plan, the member's experience is basically seamless. There may be special authorization required for certain medications, but claims are submitted and paid throughout the year according to the contract in place. The plan sponsor, who may or may not be aware of the claim, will likely see a dip in their plan reserves at some point. And certainly with a new claim, the plan will likely end up in a deficit position in that first year, as the initial deductible isn't normally part of the regular budgeting exercise when it first appears. Remember, this is an unexpected event, right? This is all okay though, because we know that there will be a recovery at the end of the year for the amounts that exceed the stop loss level. So the illustration here represents the patient's total eligible stop loss claims. This wouldn't include parameds, wouldn't include their vision care, just the amounts that would contribute towards a stop loss event. This is for a single benefit year, and the plan sponsor would be responsible for that blue portion from the first dollar to the stop loss deductible level or attachment level. Over and above that level, the stop loss carrier will now take responsibility for those claims. Internally, at year end, the claims are reviewed and all eligible amounts are submitted to the stop loss carrier for reimbursement. Once reimbursed, these amounts will return to the ASO account, offsetting deficits that may have accumulated or adding to the client's surplus if they maintained a surplus in that time frame.
And let's be clear that that's all done seamlessly to the employee and to the plan sponsor. We're doing all that work behind the scenes. So the advisor, the client, they're not dealing with the stop loss carrier. We are.
Correct. And it all happens automatically. Nobody needs to prompt it. It's all part of the regular process at the end of the year. Can we go back to the,
Oh,
yeah,
oh.
sorry, you got it. We're good. The experience with an HSA is a little bit different, typically due to the member having a component of the responsibility for the expense. Similar to a traditional plan, the member continues to submit their claims, and the claims are played through the HSA to the maximum available to the member. At that point, the claims stop being reimbursed, but the member keeps submitting their claims so that our adjudicators can track the eligible expenses. Once the stop loss threshold is then reached with those eligible expenses, we begin paying again for those eligible items. The plan sponsor might see a deficit on their plan, just like they do in the traditional arrangement. But again, as with the traditional arrangement, the claims filed at the end of the year and reimbursement is then returned to the ASO account, clearing that deficit component.
So again, if I could just jump in here, because I love jumping in, Claire. If someone's got a healthcare spending account, for example, of $5,000, and then they've got a stop loss attachment level of $7,500, the healthcare spending account can pay that expense up to that $5,000 threshold. Then the member would be responsible for the next $2,500 out of their pocket, and then the stop loss would kick in after that point, correct?
Correct. It's important also to kind of recognize that that healthcare spending account is available for all kinds of expenses, may or may not relate to that stop loss eligible component. And so there could be a potential where somebody does pay through their healthcare spending account, but maybe they have a big dental claim, and that would eat up the majority of the healthcare spending account, leaving a bit more to be paid out of pocket for those stop loss eligible components, but those dental expenses would ultimately have been out of pocket otherwise. So overall, the member's out of pocket remains the same, depending on the healthcare spending account level. They may also use a spousal plan to supplement this may be amounts that are only being paid out after a spousal plan is paid as well, because a healthcare spending account would be a secondary payer. So we don't see a lot of stop loss claims that occur with a healthcare spending account arrangement, but it's always a possibility. Stop loss plans generally include a pre-existing condition clause. These provisions are similar to an LTD pre-ex and typically would be either a 612 or a 1224 period, which we'll touch on further in a few moments. Claims relating to the pre-existing condition are capped in order to protect the plan sponsor through an ASO arrangement. The plan sponsor does have the option to absorb the cost of that expense and have claims continue to flow through their plan if they so desire. This is most often happens in cases where owners or executives are driving up the cost of their insured arrangements to the extent that they're now funding more than the plan's paying out to them. And they move over to an ASO arrangement in order to take on the responsibility for those claims, but continue to have those expenses paid through the plan. A pre-existing condition is defined as an individual having symptoms, diagnosis, or treatment in the 6 months prior to plan coverage start and related treatment in the first 12 months of plan eligibility. Both of these components need to exist in order to meet that definition. I've put asterisks on the 6 and 12-month periods because, of course, if the group is a little bit smaller, we may have a 12-24 period, but I'll just focus on 6-12 for simplicity's sake. So looking at it a little more closely, in the first scenario, an individual may have symptoms, diagnosis, or treatment prior to the plan coverage start within that 6-month period before the plan starts or before they become eligible for coverage. And they also receive treatment for that same condition in the first 12 months of the program. This would be considered a pre-existing condition, and the claim would not be eligible through the stop loss provisions. They would be limited to the stop loss attachment level, and claims over and above that level would be the member's responsibility, or we'll talk about other potential options a little bit later on as well. In our second scenario, the member doesn't have any symptoms, diagnosis, or treatment prior to the plan starting. There's no indication that there's anything wrong. They do potentially receive treatment for a new condition that's been diagnosed after they begin the plan, and that could be in the first 12 months of the program. This is not considered a pre-existing condition because we didn't know anything about it before the plan started. In the third scenario, someone might have symptoms, diagnosis, or treatment prior to the plan coverage start. But if there's no treatment in the first 12 months of the program, then again, this wouldn't be considered pre-existing. They might have treatment starting 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, or it could be a condition that was addressed immediately upon diagnosis and resolved prior to the plan starting. So these, again, wouldn't be considered pre-existing conditions, and a new claim would be eligible for coverage under the stop loss provision. I'm often asked how we know if something is a pre-existing condition. The first, major tip-off is usually that claims begin immediately upon enrollment or upon plan eligibility, or that we're aware of them before the plan even begins. Whether it's the reason the plan's set up for an owner or through the quoting and transition process, claims that for high-cost medications in particular are often evident in the information that we utilize in order to provide those quotes. Due to high-cost claims often being drug-related, there's often a special authorization process that's completed for those individuals, and that provides various amounts of information relating to the diagnosis, including the date of diagnosis and previously attempted treatments. We can see how and when people have had historical treatment for the particular condition and when the condition they were made aware of or when that was diagnosed. When a situation might be unclear, a patient's doctor may be contacted in order to confirm exactly when all of these things occurred. In the case of a drug-related claim and that special authorization, that may come into play. Special authorization is a review process that verifies the member's condition to confirm that they meet the medical criteria for use of a medication.
Oh,
This criteria is set out by each individual carrier based on their own reviews, but it's largely based on the approval parameters of Health Canada. It should be noted that while Health Canada doesn't get involved in the cost component of these medications, insurance carriers will take the relative efficacy of a medication versus its cost compared to other treatment methods in determining their criteria and their eligibility for a particular medication. So if you've got a medication that works just as well as an existing medication but costs twice as much, the insurance carrier may be less likely to approve that new medication as an option on their benefit programs because it works the same way as a less expensive medication. Special authorization has several goals. It protects the plan from off-label use and experimental treatment, like with Ozempic, where off-label prescription is common. This is why we're seeing so many carriers move towards a special authorization requirement for Ozempic in particular. This medication's been on the market for almost 10 years, and only in the past 5 or so has we seen the incidence of the off-label prescriptions just skyrocket to the extent that the carriers need to begin to verify the use of the medication actually corresponds to the approval under Health Canada's provisions. Secondarily, special authorization can confirm eligibility from a medical criteria perspective. For example, medications for inflammatory conditions where primary and secondary treatments should be attempted before biologics are started. So we're starting at the beginning and working through sort of a series of medications that get more and more complex and usually more and more expensive as we move along. Finally, verification that less expensive medications are being used for approved purposes can also be part of the special authorization process. Botox is a great example of this. It's used for migraines, for spasticity, and for hyperhidrosis, but wouldn't be approved for cosmetic purposes. Going through that special authorization process ensures that we're verifying that this isn't being used as a cosmetic option for an individual. So from the member's perspective, if we go to the next slide, the process for special authorization looks something like this. Typically, they'll either know in advance as part of their patient assistance program, or they'll attend the pharmacy and attempt to fill a prescription and ultimately be advised that that medication requires special authorization. So they'll have their doctor complete a special authorization claim form and submit it to us for clinical review. Should they meet the medical criteria, then the drug itself would be covered, the benefit plan will pay, and the cost would be shared with the stop loss insurance, as we see on the left-hand branch of this chart. Should that medication not be covered, however, there's a couple of other options. So the spousal plan or Trillium coverage may be available to the individual depending on the reason that they need this medication, and obviously whether their spousal plan covers that medication. So again, they'll apply for coverage under those programs. And should it be covered, the spousal plan or Trillium will pay the appropriate components. And if it's not covered, the member ultimately is responsible for the cost of that medication. Frequently, we see some assistance from the patient assistance programs with covering those expenses. It's often tied to how much the individual can afford to pay. But those manufacturers have designed these assistance programs to encourage folks to have their medication and continue to use the medication that the manufacturers are providing. So they do provide some support so that they have more and more people available or utilizing their medications. Let's look at something specific though. Let's meet Dave. Dave is a middle-aged gentleman who's diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis 15 years ago. He's attempted multiple therapies over time, and the most recent one is no longer effective. Dave's doctor says it's time to try Humira. Dave looks thrilled. Dave's doctor will connect with him with the patient support program for Humira. And after completing an enrollment, the patient support program will contact the benefits trust or his carrier to check on Dave's coverage and determine if special authorization is required. The carrier will confirm that Dave's plan does require special authorization for Humira, and the patient support program will help get the appropriate forms completed by Dave's doctor and submitted to Benefits Trust for review. Special authorization review will take place, and Dave will receive a written response that he can share with his patient support program in order to take the appropriate next steps. Stop loss plays an important role in the overall design of an ASO program. In programs where the employer is funding the claims or sharing that expense with their employees, and there's a large risk exposure like prescription drugs over $10,000 or hospital and nursing care coverage, the stop loss should be included to protect the integrity and sustainability of the plan for the group. On HSAs, where the risk lies with the employee who may not have sufficient HSA to cover their cost, the stop loss can offer support to mitigate that risk on the individual level. Stop loss isn't really required, however, on a plan where low dollar limits on a potentially catastrophic expenses occur, or those items are excluded from the plan entirely, like if you had a dental-only program, there'd be no need to include a stop loss provision. It's also not necessary if you have other plan design components in place to mitigate those large expenses, like Formulary Protect. Stop loss can still be included to reduce the overall exposure to a large claim. So while you might have limitations, for example, on the prescriptions, the hospitalization, and the nursing care, a claim could include several different types of expenses that cumulatively could still exceed that $10,000 threshold or whatever threshold has been set up for the plan. And so including the stop loss there helps the plan sponsor ensure that that potential for a cumulative claim is also protected.
Claire, if we could just go back to the pre-authorization program
Mm-hmm.
and the patient assistance program. Dave is also an equipment operator, okay? And he doesn't understand what the Trillium program is. He doesn't understand the special authorization program. Is he left on his own to figure this out, or how does it work?
I mean, the patient support programs are super helpful. They do a lot of this work. We also have the option for a coverage navigation through Claim Secure that can assist with these kinds of transitions or with this kind of assistance for, Dave to help find that Trillium documentation, confirm whether or not the drug's going to be eligible, and work through those forms that he may have to complete.
Yeah, so there are people that we work with either internally with your department or with Claim Secure, our partner, our drug partner on this, where they're hand-holding and dealing with this individual on an individual basis. So they're talking to someone as opposed to a call center and getting the answers and navigation that they need, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so they're not left on their own. So thank you very much, Claire. As Claire mentioned, the pre-existing condition clause is there to protect against future catastrophic claims. And when we're taking over cases, we know if there's a large amount claim. We know we can see it in the experience. So often, and Claire, maybe you can jump back in, but if there's no, just to be, perfectly clear, if there is nobody that is taking any drugs that are going to exceed the stop loss level, this really, the pre-existing condition clause really doesn't affect the plan, correct?
Absolutely. You're always looking for that potential. We're always making sure that we know what all of those components are. Sometimes there's something that kind of hides in the background, and we have an agreement that those kind of transitional claims, if it just wasn't even evident at the time, it's absolutely considered to be new because it wasn't something that was known. Again, we're going back to that idea of an unexpected event, something that wasn't known, that wasn't available in the information provided, that the client wasn't aware of, that would trigger a stop loss eligible claim versus something that was known that might trigger that pre-existing condition situation.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time, Claire, and thank you very much. I know all of us certainly appreciate it. You explained it very well. So thank you very much, Claire. Appreciate that. And you'll be available for certainly questions afterwards as well. But stop loss is important, as we know. It's an insurance policy with a high deductible or a deductible. Not high is a relative term, right? But stop loss is a valuable tool to protect plan sponsors and plan members. What do I mean by that? Plan sponsors, well, it's there to protect it so the integrity of the promise continues into perpetuity. It's also there to protect plan members because for example, if I'm making a promise to all of my employees that they're going to have this benefit plan as part of their compensation, and then, all of a sudden there's a claim, and the claim is, $100,000 a year for the next 10 years or $1 million claim. If I don't have the appropriate insurance in place, my costs are going to go through the roof. I got to keep that promise, and I might have to adjust that promise after the fact. So Claire, for example, who's been with us 25 years, right, and has a family and family protection in place, and I got to go to Claire and say, sorry, Claire, I was dumb and I didn't have the appropriate insurance in place in the promise that I made you, and now I've got to redo this promise and put a $5,000 drug cap on because we can't afford to do this anymore. So that affects Claire. So it's there to protect the plan members as well. So the pre-existing condition clause is actually a very positive thing, and it's there to protect the plan sponsor and existing plan members. It's a contract of insurance. It's transparent. It's written, and it's a known event. It's a known. People can see it. They can touch it. I'd love for somebody to send me the large amount pooling contract or the large amount pooling wording because it doesn't exist. And in our session last Thursday, Dave Patriarch was talking about this a fair amount. He goes, it's a notional thing. It doesn't exist. There is no writing on it. And I've looked at a number of insurance contracts in preparing um, this presentation, and they don't exist. Large amount pooling is an underwriting notion that they can put into place, but there's no wording around the contract, no wording around the what it covers and what it doesn't cover and how it works. The other thing that's important to know is stop loss insurance is in the pre-existing condition clause is really there to protect against future employees. So I can ask all sorts of questions, and when I'm doing a job interview for somebody, for a new customer service rep that we hire, or a new salesperson that we hire, whatever the situation is, right? I can ask that person a whole bunch of questions, about what their experience is, what their pay expectations are, what they like to do as hobbies and so on. But the question that I can ask is, do you or any of your family members take an expensive medication? Or a medication that might be more than $5,000 a year? That's a question that I can't ask. So we've got this terrific business going here, and we polish widgets. And I'm going to hire a new customer service rep and pay them $45,000 a year. And I'm going to make them a promise that covers them for unlimited drugs. And all of a sudden, that person comes and in our case, 3-month probationary period. After that 3 months, then they're eligible for the plan, and bang, they hit us with $1 million claim. So what's the stop loss there, or the pre-existing condition clause there? It's there to protect the integrity of the plan against that unexpected event, but it's there to protect the integrity of the plan. So we're not buying claims. We're not bringing on a $100,000 problem with a $35,000 or $45,000 employee. So it's important to know, and it's interesting when explaining this to clients, and sometimes it needs to be re-explained to clients. But when explaining it to clients, they go, "Thank you." They go, "Thank you very much. This is important and this is great." We've never had client pushback from this particular pre-existing condition clause because, again, in 99.9% of the cases, it's there to protect the client against future employees that they're hiring. So when we're talking about clients and prospects, I think there's 5 great questions that you can ask around this. I'm a big question person. I like to ask questions. I always say it's about being interested, and it's asking questions about their business. It's not specific insurance related jargon questions, if you would. Hey, just how do you feel about your TLR? Client's going to look at you going, "Pardon? What does that have to do with me? What are you talking about?" Or, I recommend that we use Manulife, for example, for your life insurance because they use the GAM83 unisex mortality table to determine your rates. How do you feel about that? What? You're just trying to pretend how smart you are, but it really makes no sense. So I think we need to answer questions in specific language, and the answers to the questions is going to lead you to have an informed discussion with them. Right? It's about having informed discussions and answering or asking great questions. And it's also going to help them become educated about the implications of their promise. And this is going to lead you to creating a plan that makes sense for their company. Right? It's not about you designing the plan, it's about them designing the promise that they want to make to their employees with their eyes wide open, because again, no one likes surprises. So One of the great questions to ask that I've asked many, many times is transparency important to you? You- You're talking about their business. You're not talking about their promise. You're talking about their business. Is transparency important to you? Stop loss premiums are listed as a separate line item, right? It's a premium for an insurance policy. We have a flat dollar amount for that insurance policy premium. It's, so many dollars per single people and so many dollars per family persons, right? So it's transparent. They see it, they can touch it, they can buy it. Just like the automobile insurance on your car, your house insurance. You know how much it costs, right? So is transparency important to you in your business? It's not embedded. The large amount pooling rates aren't embedded in the health rates. They're not embedded in the out of country coverage. No, it's a direct line item. Stop loss has a clear and defined contract, and there's a premium associated with that contract. That's transparency. Another great question to ask is, do you like financial surprises? Again, we were talking about financial surprises. Nobody likes financial surprises, but hey, do you like financial surprises? No. If someone asked me that question, I told you I'd like to win the lottery. That's a pretty significant financial surprise, but generally speaking, I don't like financial surprises. All of a sudden, somebody comes to me and says, "Oh yeah, that photocopier you bought, for example, or that suite of printers that you bought. Well, geez, they're not $500 each; they're $5,000 each." Well, that's a pretty significant financial surprise because we have 40 of them, right? So what would happen if the promise that you are making has a large claim and it hits the plan? That could be a significant financial surprise because your costs are going to increase, right? You need to explain the implications of a large drug claim and what it means with different plan designs. Stop loss is a contract of insurance that picks up the claim after a certain level, after a certain deductible or attachment level is satisfied. But again, you got a 15 life case, a 20 life case, a 30 life case, whatever it is, $100,000 claim over 10 years, it's $1 million, right? Is that sustainable for a 15 life case? It's gonna require some plan changes unless the appropriate insurance policy is in place. And that's what we're talking about. So a great question. Do you like financial surprises? It creates a discussion. Another great question, and I've asked this many times as well, you know, do you want to take full advantage of government programs that are available? Ask an entrepreneur that question. Ask a business owner that question. They go, the amount of money I pay in taxes, absolutely, I want to take advantage of these programs. Tell me more about them, right? And it's interesting because as tax-paying Ontarians, for example, and there are different programs in different provinces, but the Trillium Drug Program is alive and well, and it started a number of years ago. And actually started with Bob Ray because of AIDS, and we can go into that, but that's a long discussion. But it's a program that a lot of business owners don't realize that they can take advantage of if they structure their benefit plan appropriately or the promise that they're making to their employees appropriately so they could take advantage of these government programs. It's not necessarily replacing it, it's taking advantage of it. We use Formulary and Formulary Protect Plus, and that lowers their stop loss premiums. So if we put Formulary Protect in place, which is a formulary, it's a defined formulary that says it doesn't cover these high cost drugs, and then they have to use the Trillium Drug Program. It's fantastic. Find out more about Formulary and Formulary Protect. We encourage you to either reach out to one of us and we can talk more about that if you don't know about it, or visit our website at thebenefitstrust.com, go to the Advisor Resource Center, find your way through there, but you'll see we did a whole session, a whole Zoomcast on Formulary and Formulary Protect Plus, and how it works and the intricacies of it. And Dave Wojcik from Claim Secure was on that call with us, and he explains it just beautifully. But again, when you ask this question, do you want to take full advantage of the government programs that are available? Most clients say, yeah, I want to look into this. I want to know, I need to know more about it, how this can work with the promise that I want to make to my employees. Another great question. Is the sustainability of your promise important to reach your long-term goals? If somebody asked me that question because our business was not selling, not a TPA, our business was polishing widgets, and they said, somebody asked me the question, is the sustainability of your promise important to reach your long-term goals? And the answer is absolutely it's important. Because again, I want to be there to protect Claire. I want to be there to protect Carrie and Jordan and Rob and all these people, right? I want to be there to the benefit plan that is in place. I want it to be there when they need it the most. So do they need to change the promise if a $100,000 drug hits the plan? If somebody asked me that question, I'd say, well, hold on a second. Don't I have the appropriate insurance in place? Or do they? Right? But if somebody asked me that question, I would say, yes, I have the appropriate insurance in place. So I don't have to worry about that. I know I'm limited. Our insurance policy, our stop loss policy has got a $10,000 attachment level. And yes, I'm prepared and willing and happy to pay that $10,000 deductible if you would. Right? So someone can get that $100,000 drug claim because it's important to me. It's a promise that I'm making to my employees. Right? So if the promise includes that prescription drug coverage with high maximums, right, stop loss is going to protect against that, client from having to fund the entire cost of the claim. So this is an important question to ask. Is the sustainability of your benefit promise important for your long-term goals? Again, we're not talking about, insurance per se. We're talking about their goals and their business success. And as advisors, we need to have conversations like this and ask questions like this in order to, educate and help the client in the 30 minutes they're looking at this year to understand that they have the appropriate coverage in place. Does large amount pooling cover me for this? I don't know. I don't know. Right? It doesn't cover you for long, that's for sure. And another great question that I love to ask this question, is your plan protected from the next employee that you hire? Is your plan protected from the next employee that you hire? Again, large amount pooling, is it really? Not sure, right? Can you define it? Can you show it to me how it's going to be calculated, how it's going to be handled, when you get a $100,000 claim or $1 million claim, right? So this next question can lead to how the pre-existing condition clause with stop loss can mitigate the risk. A new employee with an expensive claim may be limited, for example, to $5,000, or maybe limited up to that $10,000 attachment level. But it protects the integrity of the plan. It protects the integrity of the promise that you are making to your employees. Real life example: we hire a new employee, and I'm sure we'll hire more this year. But their plan is there's a pre-existing condition, and their benefit plan is limited to that particular amount in that during that pre-existing condition case. In this case, it's a 612 pre-existing condition clause. The person is aware of this, that we're hiring. So all of a sudden, we're not hiring someone and bringing in a $100,000 or $1 million problem. So a great way to ask the question is, hey, does your plan have a pre-existing condition clause? No, that's what? No. Is your plan protected from the next employee you hire? Again, next employee we hire is going to be a $35,000 CSR and, might be walking in with a $100,000 problem. We want to make sure we're protected against that. So those are 5 great questions. And our job, and those are questions that you can ask your client. Those are questions you can ask prospects. But I'll tell you, they're great, great, great prospecting questions because it separates you from everybody else. It separates you from the people that are not on this call, quite frankly. And when you ask questions like that, when you ask great questions like that, it stimulates conversation and you're advising your client or prospect. It's our job as advisors to advise. When to properly advise our clients, we must ask the right questions. We got to understand what's important to them. In our business, what's important to me as a business owner is the long-term outlook for our business. Our future is going to be bigger than our past. We need to have this long-term approach. That's important to us. But these answers are going to lead you to having productive discussions and the implications of each promise. Right? So it's important to ask questions. It's important to advise. On that note, stop loss is important. It's about being proactive and not reactive. It's about asking the right questions. It's about having meaningful discussions with your clients to protect your clients and make them more profitable. Because you know what? It's clear. No one likes to be surprised. No one likes to be surprised. We did a session last month in the month of February, and we were talking about the high cost drugs. And there was a study that we found, and it was done in 2023, so it's a couple of years old now, but it was done by the government of Canada. And they said, In that study, they said one in 91 employees covered under an employee benefit program have claims in excess of $10,000 a year. One in 91. The other thing that it said is of those 1 in 91 claims that are over $10,000 a year, the average claim was $104,000. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. 1 in 91. I remember when we first started talking about stop loss. I don't know how many years ago it was, Claire, but quite a few years ago. We first started talking about stop loss. It was 1 in 3,000. Now it's 1 in 91. And this is reality today. So it's more important to have these proactive discussions today, not being reactive. So, questions, ideas, and discussions. And let me just stop sharing for a second. But we want to thank everybody for certainly joining us. But questions, ideas, and discussions. And Mike Barrow was on earlier. Is he still here?
I am.
You are, Mike.
Yes.
If,
So
if
be a
you,
bit of a devil's advocate question here for you.
yeah,
During the presentation, you talked about stop loss being for unexpected high cost
yep.
expenses. And so I'm going to focus on the word unexpected. Year one, no problem. Unexpected is easy to justify. But year two and beyond, how do you justify the unexpected being satisfied to continue pooling those claims or stop lossing those claims?
So, in other words, somebody all of a sudden has a $100,000 drug.
Yeah.
And now that $100,000 drug, they've got to take that medication for the foreseeable future. So it's 100,000, 100,000, 100,000.
Right.
Using that example of a million, it's $1 million claim because it's spread over 10 years.
Over time. Yep.
So what happens to the stop loss premiums?
No, so no happens to stop loss premiums. How do you justify continuing to pool those claims after year two? Because you used the word unexpected
Yeah,
as to protect the plan in year one, which is clearly understandable because you didn't see it coming. But year two and beyond, you know
yeah.
it's there. So how is that justified just from a devil's advocate perspective?
Claire, you're muted. There we go.
Sorry, I had to turn myself on. Um, I think the reality is that we very much look at this as a stop loss coverage and not a shock loss coverage. And so that's how we've set up the arrangement with our carrier as well to say, okay, you know what, that's all very well and good, but the impact of that claim on an ongoing basis, if it's needed on an ongoing basis, isn't what the plan sponsor was intending when they started the program. Rob starts his coverage for, the benefits trust employees, and off we go. And then, heaven forbid, something happens and someone's got a large claim. He didn't, even if it's not unexpected from the next year's perspective, it's still unexpected in the context of what your plan was intended to do. And so continuing to have that stop loss pay for those claims on an ongoing basis, again, does exactly what it's designed to do, which is ensure that the plan itself is sustainable over time and not just protected from a 1 year, well, now you're on your own kind of situation.
So another way to say it, Michael, is it's handled very similar to from the insurance company's perspective, it's handled very similar to a long-term disability claim. Do they have reserve requirements set by the government? Probably not, but they look at the claim and they don't look at it in a 1 year period. They look at it over the diagnosis in a period of time.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And it's interesting. Now, Michael, let me put you on the spot a bit,
By all means.
if I could. Recently, we took over a case and we worked together with you, and they had some existing claims. And how did that experience go?
Oh, well, obviously, that was one of the reasons why the choice was made. Um, and so, yeah, everything was redirected and it actually reduced their costs overall significantly. So it all has worked out quite favorably.
Yeah. And when we're talking significantly, for all of us that are on the call here right now, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, like a few $100,000. So the client was happy. The employees that were dealing with the navigation process were happy with the process and the outcome. And Michael was certainly happy with the outcome as well. Right?
100%.
And as are we. So everybody's happy and we got new business. So it's great. Anyways, thank you all very much. We spent an hour together yucking it up. I know there were a couple things in the chat box, and hopefully they were answered. Now we're going to stick around for a few minutes. But again, for signing up for today, Mike Ignatz is going to send you out the slide presentation as well as a CE credit for participating. And he'll get that done very shortly. As well as that, we're going to sign you up for our Trusted Advisor newsletter. And on behalf of all of us at the Benefits Trust, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. We encourage you to visit us at the Benefits Trust. We're going to reach out to you, and you're going to, hopefully give us a chance to quote on some business. If we're doing business together, thank you very much. If we're not doing business together, we've got lots of 2026 inventory on the shelves, and we'd love to do business with you. So thank you very much. And we're going to stick around for a few minutes. If anybody has any more questions, thoughts, ideas, and so on, we'd greatly appreciate it and love to hear from you. So again, thank you all very much, and continued great selling. Bye for now.